Like the video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments who you think is lying, because once you hear this story, you won't be able to look away. The rain had turned the street into a mirror, reflecting blue and red lights that pulsed like a heartbeat gone wrong. Police tape flapped against a rusted fence, its sharp snap cutting through the low murmur of voices. At the edge of the lot, beneath a flickering security lamp, a body lay face down in a shallow pool of water that smelled of oil and rot. The call had come in just after midnight. An anonymous voice. One sentence. One address. Then silence. The victim was a woman in her early 30s, dressed for an evening that never ended. One shoe was missing. Her phone was gone. There were no visible wounds, no blood, no weapon left behind. The coroner would later say the cause of death wasn't obvious. It never is at first. The city had seen worse scenes, louder scenes. But something about this one made even the veterans uneasy. It was too clean. Too quiet. As if the truth had already been wiped away. Detective Mara Holt arrived as the rain eased, stepping carefully around the puddles, her coat darkened at the shoulders. She had worked homicides for 12 years, long enough to trust the feeling in her gut when a case didn't want to be solved. She crouched near the body, noting the angle of the neck, the tension in the hands. No defensive marks. No sign of a struggle. The absence of evidence can be louder than proof. By morning, the victim had a name. Lena Ward. Marketing consultant. Recently divorced. Last seen leaving a downtown bar with coworkers. Security footage from the bar showed her laughing, coat slung over one arm, stepping into the night alone. The camera outside the parking lot where she was found had been broken for weeks. No footage. No witnesses. Just a timeline with gaps wide enough to swallow a life. The investigation moved fast because it had to. Pressure came from above, from the media, from a public that wanted answers before it had questions. Detectives canvassed the area, knocked on doors, chased rumors that led nowhere. Phones were tapped. Alibis were checked. Every lead collapsed under its own weight. There was no DNA recovered at the scene. No fingerprints. No weapon. No trace of anyone else being there. Then a story appeared. Evan Cross was the last person to admit seeing Lena alive. A former colleague. Quiet. Polite. The kind of man people described as forgettable. He came forward on his own, said he had spoken to her outside the bar, that she seemed upset, that she mentioned wanting to clear her head. His timeline placed him near the area, but not at the lot. He had an alibi, thin but intact. A late-night convenience store receipt. A cashier who thought she recognized him. Maybe. Detective Holt listened without interrupting, watching his hands, his eyes, the spaces between his words. He never contradicted himself. He never asked what evidence they had. He simply told a story, calmly, carefully, as if he had rehearsed it without realizing why. Days passed. Then weeks. The case stalled until it didn't. A coworker of Lena's came forward, claiming she had been afraid of Evan. Said she overheard arguments, saw tension, noticed the way his smile dropped when Lena turned away. Another friend recalled a text message that felt off, though the message itself was gone. Deleted. Phones get replaced. Memories don't. The story grew. It filled the silence left by missing evidence. Prosecutors took notice. They didn't need blood or fingerprints if they had motive, opportunity, and a narrative the jury could believe. Evan Cross was arrested on a gray morning, let out of his apartment in handcuffs while neighbors watched from behind curtains. He didn't resist. He didn't shout. He looked confused, like someone who had missed a crucial page in the script. As the case files piled up, Detective Holt returned to the scene one last time, standing alone in the quiet lot. The rain had washed away everything it could, but something still bothered her. Something small. Something everyone else had dismissed. And when a sealed envelope arrived on her desk that night, containing a single piece of information no one could explain, she realized the story the jury would hear was about to collide with a truth that never existed at all. The envelope had no return address, just Detective Holt's name typed cleanly across the front. Inside was a photocopy of a parking permit, creased, faded, and stamped with a date that made her stomach tighten. The permit belonged to a private garage 3 blocks from where Lena Ward's body had been found. Time-stamped entry: 11:47 p.m. Time-stamped exit: 12:32 a.m. Lena had been pronounced dead just after midnight. The permit wasn't in Evan Cross's name. Holt ran the plate number through every database she had access to. It came back registered to a shell company, recently dissolved, its paperwork routed through a law firm known for handling discrete arrangements. That alone wasn't proof of anything, but it was something real, something solid. And in a case built entirely on air, solid things mattered. She brought it to her supervisor. He barely glanced at it. "Circumstantial," he said. Too late. The prosecution already has their theory. That word again. Theory. The trial moved forward like a machine that couldn't be stopped. Prosecutors stood before the jury and told a simple, compelling story. Evan Cross had been obsessed, rejected, angry. Lena wanted distance. Evan wanted control. They painted him as a man who smiled in public and simmered in private. They didn't need evidence if they had emotion. Witnesses testified about tension they couldn't quite explain, about conversations they couldn't fully remember, about feelings they only understood in hindsight. Each statement alone was fragile. Together, they sounded convincing. The defense tried to push back. They highlighted the lack of forensic evidence. No DNA. No fingerprints. No proof Evan had ever been in the lot. They reminded the jury that coincidence is not guilt. That stories change when people want answers badly enough. But doubt is a quiet thing. Stories are loud. When the convenience store cashier took the stand, her uncertainty was framed as nervousness. When phone records showed gaps, prosecutors called them deliberate. When Evan didn't react emotionally enough, they called it coldness. When he did react, they called it guilt. Detective Holt sat in the back of the courtroom every day, watching the narrative harden. She noticed what wasn't said: the broken camera, the missing phone, the fact that no one could place Evan at the scene at the exact time Lena died. She submitted the parking permit quietly into evidence, buried beneath exhibits the jury would likely never focus on. During deliberations, Holt tried one last time. She tracked the dissolved shell company to a financial consultant named Marcus Vale. Vale had crossed paths with Lena weeks before her death, consulting on a marketing deal that never went public. He had money, influence, and a documented history of legal disputes handled quietly, efficiently. By the time Holt brought this to the prosecutor, the jury was already deciding. The verdict came back guilty. The courtroom exhaled. Lena's family cried. Evan Cross stared straight ahead, his face empty, as if the words had passed through him without landing. Reporters rushed to file their stories. Justice had been served. The system had worked. Except it hadn't. Days later, Holt returned to her desk to find her access credentials revoked. She was reassigned, effective immediately. No explanation. No discussion. Just a polite reminder that the case was closed. She didn't stop digging. Late one night, she found something she wasn't supposed to: an internal email chain between the prosecution team and an external consultant, Marcus Vale. The messages were careful, vague, but unmistakable. Lena had threatened to expose financial irregularities. Vale had flagged her as a risk. He had also provided background information that subtly redirected suspicion toward Evan Cross long before the arrest. The parking permit matched his company vehicle. Holt printed everything. Before she could take it any further, her apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, just moved. Papers shifted. Drawers left open. A message without words. The story the jury believed was already locked in place. But the evidence that never existed was starting to feel deliberately erased. And someone was watching to make sure it stayed that way. The break-in changed everything. Detective Mara Holt stopped pretending this was just about a bad conviction. Someone had crossed a line, not to steal, but to warn. That meant the truth was close enough to be dangerous. She moved quietly after that. No official channels. No emails. No phone calls that could be traced. She copied the internal messages to a secure drive and handed duplicates to a journalist she trusted, a woman who understood the difference between rumor and proof. If anything happened to Holt, the story would survive her. In prison, Evan Cross learned to live with the echo of a verdict he still didn't understand. He replayed the trial in his head, every word, every look from the jury, searching for the moment where he lost them. He never found it. Guilt had arrived fully formed, without evidence, without reason he could grasp. His appeal stalled, buried under procedure and time. Then the story cracked. The journalist published a quiet piece at first, buried in the back pages. It didn't accuse. It asked questions. About the missing phone. About the broken camera. About a financial consultant whose name had appeared and disappeared from the case file, without explanation. Readers noticed. So did people with something to lose. Pressure mounted when a second article followed, this one detailing the shell company and the parking permit. The timeline no longer fit the story, the jury had been told. Public confidence wavered. Advocacy groups took interest. Lawyers who had ignored Evan's letters began returning his calls. An independent review was ordered under the language of procedural integrity. The prosecution called it unnecessary. The defense called it overdue. During the review, the internal emails surfaced. They showed early assumptions, quiet suggestions. A narrative shaped long before evidence, or the lack of it, was fully considered. Marcus Vail's role became impossible to ignore. He had advised the prosecution on financial context, on potential motives, on which leads mattered, all while protecting his own. When investigators finally interviewed Vail, he was calm, cooperative. He denied everything that mattered. But lies leave patterns, and this time, someone was looking closely. Travel records placed him in the city the night Lena died. Phone data showed his device near the private garage during the same window. The same garage tied to the parking permit Holt had found months earlier. It wasn't a confession. It didn't have to be. The court vacated Evan Cross's conviction on grounds of prosecutorial misconduct and failure to disclose exculpatory evidence. The word innocent was never used. It rarely is. But the cell door opened anyway. Evan walked out into daylight thinner, quieter, older than the man who had entered. No cameras waited for him. No apology followed. Freedom arrived without ceremony. Marcus Vail was never charged with murder. The statute of limitations closed in around the financial crimes. He disappeared from public view, his assets scattered, his name scrubbed from databases that once protected him. Lena Ward's case was officially reopened, then quietly suspended. Unsolved. Detective Holt resigned. She testified before oversight committees, answered questions that came years too late, and returned her badge without regret. The system, she said, didn't fail because of malice. It failed because a story was easier than uncertainty. Years later, jurors from the trial were interviewed anonymously. Most said the same thing. They believed the prosecution. They trusted the narrative. They assumed evidence existed somewhere, even if they never saw it. They didn't know they had convicted a man on a story alone. The evidence never existed. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss it.